hope.
And we're leaving that interview a little early. Ashraf Ghani, the former Afghan president, talking to the people of his country, indeed the broader region, indeed the world, all the countries that had a strategic interest in his country via his Facebook Live page. Let's listen in to what he's saying.
And that was the main purpose of the goal. It was, developments took place very fast. My purpose was to work with the Taliban to reach a conclusion for a comprehensive government through negotiations to pave the way for such a transition. Their compatriots, I would like to speak to you about the recent developments. Since Sunday, on Sunday I was following a routine schedule, and I was working on order and discipline for Kabul. My security officials advised me to get away from those circumstances, basically to be away from the circumstances, to keep a distance. My security forces took everything in their hands, under control. First, if I had stayed, I would have been witnessing bloodshed in Kabul. There's a poor quality of sound. Unfortunately, the voice is breaking up. My mission was going to be that for power seeking, Kabul should not be turned into another Yemen or Syria. Minutes after I was forced to leave Kabul, there were a number of people who entered the presidential palace, Ark, who could not even speak our national languages. They were looking for me to find me. What had happened 25 years ago in Afghanistan was going to take place again. And that was something that needed to be avoided, a shameful development like that. But for Afghanistan, dignity of Afghanistan was important for me, and that was going to be ensured. So I had to leave Afghanistan in order to prevent bloodshed, in order to make sure that a huge disaster is prevented. There are many details that, of course, need to be provided. Those who think that I've fled the country, my message is that you should not judge if you do not have the actual information and details. Amir Abdurrahman Khan and other leaders also had to leave and go to Kandahar or other places. There's going to be another stage, another episode. Those who say that your president sold you and fled, that's not correct. The way I left Afghanistan was such that I had to leave my books, which actually were my main assets. I had to there were some documents, confidential documents, that actually, unfortunately, were left there, and they're now in the hands of others. And I did not take anything with me. Just with one shalwar and kameez and one waistcoat, I had to leave the country. In these days, the political assassination, personality assassination of my personality has been going on, saying that I have taken money with me. They're completely baseless and lies. And you can actually find out from the customs officials, from other authorities, that they were baseless in order to avoid disorder and bloodshed that had to be done. The current negotiations that had been embarked upon by Dr. Abdullah, I support them until the process is completed. I thank security and defense forces and when it comes to the political leadership of the Taliban, it was a failure on their part and a failure on our part that the negotiations did not lead to anything. The peace process should lead to the end of war. The Trump administration had actually anticipated that the peace negotiations amongst the Afghans should be Afghan-led. I'm proud of what has been done. One last message. Currently, I'm in the UAE so that disasters are avoided. I'm in consultation with others until I return and so that I could continue my efforts for justice for the Afghans and to achieve the achievements, the real Islamic and national achievements of the people of Afghanistan, so that we could fight for them together. Thank you very much for all the messages and sympathies that you have sent. Thank you very much. Long live Afghanistan. Apologies for the bad.
Short and a sweet address there via his Facebook Live page from Ashraf Ghani, the former now president of Afghanistan. Let's just take you through what he had to say. He was talking for what, maybe 10 minutes, I guess, just a little over 10 minutes. A very, very personal address to the people of Afghanistan, the broader region, the international community, talking about just that immediate time, that period of time when he decided to leave the country. He said events took place very fast. My purpose had been to pave the way for a transition. As of since Sunday, working on order for Kabul, his security people advised him to get away. If he'd stayed, he would have witnessed bloodshed in Kabul. The people of Kabul have witnessed bloodshed because there has been bloodshed in Kabul, the city, of course. He didn't say that, that's me saying that, and in the province of Kabul as well. He said he was forced to leave. What took place before was going to happen again, he said, referring to the events of, I guess, the 1980s, the 1990s, up to the point when the Taliban were banished. Many details need to be provided I guess he's teasing us a little bit there. He said he had to leave his main assets and confidential documents. He described the process going on around him now as personality assassination. He said it's baseless. He said he thanked the defense forces. Political leadership of the Taliban and the political leadership of Afghanistan failed the people of Afghanistan. Listening to all of that for us, as ever, was our diplomatic editor, James Bays. James, no message to the people of Afghanistan, no reading or no kind of descriptive language, as if he seems to understand or not the enormity of what's happening.
Just his justification for why he left and why he fled Afghanistan. He actually said there, I didn't flee Afghanistan, but everyone is aware that's exactly what happened. Also trying to justify how he left, because remember, there have been numerous allegations that he left with suitcases full of cash. In fact, the Afghan embassy in Tajikistan, as they were taking down his picture in the embassy, were demanding Interpol arrest him. There have been demands also. The Russian special advisor on Afghanistan has said recently, Ambassador Karbalov, that perhaps the Afghan people should put Ashraf Ghani on trial. And I think he's trying to defend himself. He said certainly that he only went because he was forced by his security officials. And then he claimed that as soon as he'd left, people actually came to the presidential palace looking for him. There's nothing that we can find, I think, at this stage to support that claim. Certainly, we understand that he left with two close officials, with Hamdullah Mohib, who was his national security advisor, and Fazl Faisali, who was the director of administrative affairs in the presidential palace. Two people very close to Hamid Karzai. But Peter, it's worth telling you that most of the others in the government, close to Ashraf Ghani, it's worth telling you that most of the others in the presidential palace and among the cabinet are really despising the former president now. And it was, I think, pretty true even a couple of weeks ago. As you know, I was in Kabul a couple of weeks ago. I spent a little bit of time in the presidential palace. I spoke to senior members of the Ghani government, to former ministers as well, and there wasn't really much of a good word to be said about Ashraf Ghani, and clearly the way he's held in Afghanistan has got worse since the way he departed Afghanistan. He, of course, denying that he took suitcases of cash, saying he just took his shalwar kameez, his traditional Afghan robes and Afghan shirt, and left Kabul. He's turned up, we believe, in the United Arab Emirates, we think in Dubai. Will we hear anything more from Ashraf Ghani? I think it seems very unlikely, despite he says there'll be another episode, that he's going to play any important role in the future of Afghanistan now.
Is he also slightly misinterpreting the events that took place over the past, particularly the last week, James, maybe the last 2 weeks, when he said what happened should have led to an end to the war? Because whilst, yes, it was being labelled, particularly where you are by some of the American networks, as being a war, another war in Afghanistan, there were large areas where it was actually more of a drive-by shooting on the part of the Taliban, because the Afghan security apparatus was turning tail and running. It was taking off its uniforms, or it was even being kind of subscripted, if you will, or subscribed into being part of the Taliban.
Absolutely. Such surprising events and such speed to all of that. He may have been referring to that. I think it's also possible he was referring to what should have happened to the peace deal. Because remember, the US did sign a peace deal did sign a peace deal with the Taliban, and there was supposed to be a negotiated settlement between the government of Afghanistan and the Taliban, and of course it didn't end like that. It ended in a military way, with the Taliban taking control of the situation on the ground in Kabul. He's certainly not the president now, and even his vice president, who's still in Afghanistan, he says he is now the caretaker president of Afghanistan. And it's interesting that Amrullah Saleh, the vice president, is in Panjshir. That's a small province of Afghanistan, just a little finger of territory, but it's the one little bit of Afghanistan that hasn't at this stage been properly controlled by the Taliban. Amrullah Saleh, who I don't think was in a sort of tactical coalition with Ashraf Ghani, but I don't think would be described as one of his close allies, says he's going to continue fighting against the Taliban. For now, though, pretty clear who is in pretty much total control of most of the country, and that is the Taliban.
James, as ever, a pleasure. Many thanks, James Bays, our diplomatic editor there at the UN in New York. Ashraf Ghani, the former president of Afghanistan, saying as well, I am proud of what we have done. I'm in the UAE so disasters are avoided. We are in consultations with others. I want to achieve real achievements for Afghanistan, he said. 1730G, your top stories. As we've been on air this half hour, the former president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, has just spoken to the Afghan people via his Facebook Live page from where he's staying right now, the United Arab Emirates. There had been confusion about his whereabouts since he left the country on Sunday. The UAE says he's been taken in with his family on humanitarian grounds. Taliban fighters have reportedly opened fire on protesters in the eastern Afghan city of Jalalabad. 3 people are said to have been killed and several others were wounded. Gunfire has also been heard during protests in the eastern city of Khost. There has been no immediate reporting of any injuries. Demonstrators raised the Afghan national flag over a road in the city. Taliban fighters were then seen chasing crowds away. Rob McBride is in Kabul.
This was a particularly ugly incident, and I think it's being seen as really, since the Taliban just assumed power a couple of days ago, as the first major act of defiance against them. Jalalabad is a very important city. It is east of here towards the border with Pakistan, and this protest began over the national flag. Now, since the Taliban have taken power, they have very consciously been removing the Afghan national flag and replacing it with the Taliban flag. We've seen that a lot here in the capital, Kabul. It's left a lot of people very upset.